Let the word go forth.
Fool me once.
Are you fired up?
I'm not a crook.
Are you ready to go?
Shame on you.
It's Abe Lincoln's Top Hat, hosted by Ben Kissel.
Fool me, can't get fooled again.
Hey, what's up, everyone? How you doing? Ben Kissel here with Travis Morningstar.
Looking forward to an extremely normal year.
Of course, always. It's going to be a fun episode. I'll tell you that much, folks. A little bit later on in this episode, I have an interview with immigration attorney. He's a dude out of San Antonio, Texas. His name is Lance Curtright. So I am absolutely excited to speak with him. And then next week, I have an interview coming out with Rabia Oshadri, who wrote the book on Adnan Syed, who, of course, was the main subject for the world-famous podcast Serial. So stick around. Be sure you tune in next week for my interview with her. I absolutely cannot wait. And, of course, my interview coming up a little bit later on in this episode. So let's just start with the biggest news maybe in U.S. history.
Yep.
Possibly, like legitimately, not an understatement. We're going to focus on the shutdown here for a couple of minutes, and then we'll get to the interview. So we got the shutdown now, this government shutdown over this make-believe crisis. Again, it's not a crisis if you can plan it, if you can, make arrangements around it. It's obviously a crisis made by Donald Trump. It's a political crisis. This happens all the time, and certainly a horrible precedent for the president to set the idea that they can just declare potentially a national emergency, a state of national emergency, because they're not getting their political will. If you think about this from a conservative perspective and from a libertarian perspective, this greatly expands the power of the executive branch, greatly expands the power of the president. And when we talk about the protection of constitutional rights, they are at risk here, not just under Donald Trump, but going forward. And if you are a Republican that's supporting him, if you are a more libertarian dude or woman that's supporting him, think about this. When a Democrat gets into office and they want to declare a national emergency because of the true crisis that's happening in this country with the unbelievable amount of gun deaths that occur on a regular basis in this nation. Theoretically, if they want to take a page out of Donald Trump's book, they can declare a national emergency, say we're coming for your guns. Time to give up your Second Amendment rights, folks. So you got to be careful. Always remember, Donald Trump's not going to be there forever. Might be there for a limited time only. Who knows if he does go with the national emergency? A lot of people have said impeachment is much, much more likely. But you're not in power. Your party is not in power for long. And as we saw when it comes to the filibuster vote in the Senate, taking it down from a 60 to 51, as we see on a regular basis, the next party that's going to be elected are going to use the laws that you currently make, or the new normal. They're going to take the new normal and implement it for their own political reasons and for their own political goals. So if you are someone who is libertarian, wants small government, which in many, many ways is an accurate point of view, this is the opposite of that.
This is the moment to have outrage. There's
total outrage.
There is an impressive lack of outrage, and it's like the Democrats are NPCs in a video game, like Schumer and Pelosi standing robotically, and the rebuttal to Trump's a big. So we had national emergency declaration or whatever it was.
We had Donnie. He gave his first speech from the Oval Office, about 10 minutes long. We'll just talk briefly about the theatrics, not the content. We'll get into the content. Theatrically, he presented it. It was fine. I mean, he's the president. You get the luxury of having the greatest film set in the world, which is the Oval Office. And so, he's going on. The problem is, of course, the content is entirely flawed.
Right.
So that's the problem. Theatrically, it was
great production values.
It was fine. You're the president.
You watch an old man learn how to rebreathe for 10 minutes.
I don't know why he's always doing invisible lines of coke. I don't understand how that happens. I don't know how your breathing patterns have to work for you to. I talk for a living, and I don't think anyone has ever heard me breathe through my nostrils. But then we also had that was that. talking to his base, didn't really expand his agenda, didn't really expand his supporters whatsoever, maybe threw some red meat out there. And then we got Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. Now, again, this is the problem with binary choices. They came across, I'm sure y'all watched it, the substance of their argument was, I get what they're saying, the wall is immoral, we're not paying the $5 billion, whatever. But my God, just get a different director. Like, I thought you were the Democratic Party. Aren't you supposed to be, like, aligned with Hollywood? Just get anyone to be like, maybe Chuck Schumer shouldn't look like the entity from It Follows. Shouldn't look like he's about to murder a family of 7. He looks so, like, I don't know why he put on his, like, I'm serious face. Like, no one gives, like, stop. Nancy Pelosi, slightly better performance, but together, it was just, the optics were freaking horrible.
They moved like the band from the Chuck E. Cheese stage. Like,
yeah, it was too.
Was there a note on the teleprompter that said pivot robotically and nod?
It was crazy. So, they didn't do themselves any favors, but this is bigger than both of these parties. This is affecting 800,000 federal workers right now. We're going to talk about the workers it's affected. We're going to talk about its effect on the economy. And then we're going to talk about what are the potential steps going forward, because at some point, the government is going to have to open. It has to happen.
Does it?
It must.
Does it?
It must happen.
I think
of course, if Donald Trump does declare a state of national emergency, the courts are not siding with him on this crazy idea. But we'll talk more with Lance about that a little bit later on in the episode. So just a little bit here on what's going on with the 800,000 employees that are currently, since December 22nd, just in time for Christmas and New Year's, not getting paid. TSA and, of course, air traffic controllers, they're not getting paid. Now, this is as someone who flies, Travis and I both fly quite regularly, that is freaking horrifying. Now, I know the TSA is mostly a charade. It's mostly, to give the sense of safety, do the vast majority of things when they do the tests get through. But my friend was going through to take a flight I think it was maybe 6-7 days ago. She asked if she should take her laptop out of her bag, which of course you always do. For those that don't fly often, laptop comes out, cell phone comes out, all your electronics come out. You put them in a frickin' bin like you've committed a felony, and you're getting ready to get checked into jail. Shoes come off, all of this stuff. And the TSA employee told her, "Don't bother, I'm not getting paid." So This is horrifying. And then, of course, we have even more serious than TSA in some ways, those people that keep planes from crashing into each other. Air traffic controllers. Now, this is a job, high-stress job. They're limited to the amount of hours they work because they got to be on their A game at all times. You can't go in friggin' 50 hours in because this is life and death. These people are not getting paid. So some of them have had to pick up second jobs. And again, that is horrifying. I don't want my air traffic controllers drowsy. I want them 100% aware because I would like to get home or arrive at my location or destination alive. And that's the exact thing that they do. So because of this, we're seeing, if you're a terrorist, and I'm not giving any friggin' advice out there, but my God, any smart person would realize TSA is currently not on their A game. Air traffic controllers are being spread too thin because they had to pick up more jobs, perhaps, whatever it might be, or just not getting paid.
Yeah.
I always find money to be a great motivator for work.
Terrorists should be really bullish on this, this opportunity.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, this is the bull market.
Yeah.
This is the bull market for terrorism right now. That's for sure. Which is just horrifying. And the fact that this president is putting U.S. citizens' lives at risk, at greater risk of who knows what, terrorism, planes colliding. It's absolutely abhorrent. And again, just plays to the selfish nature of Donald Trump. And as we'll talk about with Lance a little bit later on as well, when it comes to the immigration courts, most immigration courts are shut down, are currently not processing immigrants. So we have this irony where Republicans are railing against undocumented workers, undocumented so-called aliens, which I hate that term, I think it's dehumanizing. But because the shutdown is in place, because the shutdown is happening, these courts aren't even filing perhaps deportation papers or whatever it might be. It is unreal. And of course, even some Republicans are peeling away from the president. But as we're seeing or not seeing when it comes to Mitch McConnell, who where is he? Mitch McConnell is he's just like immediately when he I just hate that when you're a politician, things are hard and then you just go away.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what killed Jimmy Carter's entire presidency, was he just dipped out, I think to Camp David or something, for like 60 or 70 days. And people are like, where the hell are you?
Yeah, McConnell.
Where the hell is Mitch McConnell?
McConnell just has like an away email message that says, I support the president.
Exactly. That's it. Reach me when the government reopens.
Exactly.
So because of that, immigration courts not working. Also, we have a situation with government websites. Security certificates for dozens of official websites have not been renewed. Affected websites include the U.S. Department of Justice, the Court of Appeals, and NASA. So that's great. NASA is it's not a secure website right now, folks. So you want to create a tangible physical attack via terrorism? Have at it. Go through our airports, go through our seaports, and if you want to commit an act of cyber terrorism, have at it, because we can't renew our frickin' security certificates for dozens of websites. According to internet services website Netcraft, more than 80 security certificates used by .gov have expired. Coast Guard, this is another thing that's happening. Coast Guard, again, for the listeners of this show, you know that when it comes to drugs, the Coast Guard catch a huge amount of drugs because the majority, again, come through our air and seaports. So Coast Guard is on the front line of the war on drugs. Around 8,500 Coast Guard civilian employees were offered, quote, a managing your finances during a furlough tip sheet. The suggestion is to, quote, get lean with household budgets, including babysitting, selling furniture or unwanted items, monetizing hobbies, picking up tutoring, or having a garage sale. That is true. That is, the government was like, how are we going to help these people cope with our inability to govern?
Sell your Beanie Babies.
Sell your Beanie Baby. That's a perfect idea. Have a garage sale.
Get rid of Nanook. He's probably worth $37 on your front lawn.
Unbelievable. Also, we have to think about the FDA. We have some food safety fears. So the FDA has suspended, of course, that's the Food and Drug Administration. I know you know that, but maybe for our listeners outside of the country, they suspended all, quote, non-essential work, causing nationwide concerns over unsafe food, as most inspections have stopped. This is according to Scott Gottlieb. He is the FDA commissioner. He said this past Wednesday. He said the agency was working to ensure, quote, high-risk facility checks continue. He said about 1/3 of the FDA's food inspections are considered high risk, looking at goods like cheese, fresh produce, and seafood. He goes on to say, it's not business as usual, and we're not doing all the things we would do under normal circumstances. So we have a situation where food is now at risk because the government is shut down. Our airports are less secure. Flying is less secure. And we have a situation where the Coast Guard can't do their jobs.
We're going to have the same level of food scrutiny that was like in the gangs of New York.
Of course. And of course, we also have the aforementioned that we mentioned on last episode, the parks. They're struggling.
They're actually considering going private and actually charging admission, and because right now they're just strewn with garbage and waste and stuff because nobody's taking care of them.
Nothing is being taken care of. New York City, we're keeping Statue of Liberty open from our own money. In New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo has committed to paying $65,000 a day to ensure the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island stay rubbish-free and open for tourists. So we're seeing the effects of what this looks like. What does a government shutdown look like in the long term? And we're beginning to really see those effects. So it's not just the human cost, but there's also an economic cost, which we'll get into in a second. But the human cost here, we're talking about potential life and death issues for a lot of people.
Yeah. So, I mean, the reason why it's all been political up until now. Funding has been supplied for government agencies and their employees up until the end of the year. Well, 2019 is here, and that funding is about to run out. And so you're going to have 800,000, upwards of 800,000 people not getting paychecks, like starting immediately.
Right.
And that means paychecks. People live paycheck to paycheck, even especially government employees.
Oh yeah.
And so you have people who won't have money for medication, for mortgages, for electricity.
Absolutely.
And people are going to, not to make it sound hysterical, people are going to die or be damaged.
Absolutely. That's
maimed by this thing in more ways than politically.
This is very serious. The government, 25% of the government shut down for tomorrow. That'll be 22 days for the longest time in American history. Is absolutely
setting new benchmarks for embarrassment.
For how bad it can go. But now one of the ultimate ironies here is, and I know some people mention this, but if you actually look at apprehensions on the U.S.-Mexico border, in 2000, we were at 1.6 million. Now, that has dropped dramatically over the years. This year, or last year rather, 2018, was at 400,000. So this whole idea that somehow now what's happening on the U.S.-Mexico border can be considered a national emergency, while other previous administrations had over triple the amount, and it was not considered a national emergency, is just so stupid and aggravating, and the American people are just, you can feel the amount of anger. This is going to be a massive political loser for Trump on every level, whether it be people who are rational on immigration or people who care about the economy. So what's going on right now with the economy? Economics estimate that the shutdown is likely to shave between 0.04% and 0.7% of gross domestic product. Of course, that is GDP. That's going to be shaved off of our economic growth per week, an average of just over $1 billion. Now, this actually is not as bad as some people speculated it could be. In 2013, there was a 16-day government shutdown. That we lost over $20 billion, which affected much more of the government. It was a larger government shutdown. Therefore, the economic ramifications were bigger. So this is according to Joel Prakken. Now, he's chief U.S. economist at Macroeconomic Advisors by IHS Markit. He says, as long as this shutdown is relatively short, these impacts are going to be fairly modest. Now, obviously, as I just mentioned, this is not going to be relatively short. It will be the longest in U.S. history. So as we haven't seen a huge economic hit yet, the toll will continue to mount, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. And the government, if it continues down this road, Donald Trump has said it could take weeks. The economy will begin taking a drastic hit, which is going to harm, as we've seen countless times, whether it be farmers going with the tariffs, not being able to get their $12 billion promise from the government to offset the costs of said tariffs. They're getting screwed. And now people, conservative perhaps, on Wall Street, financially conservative, they're also going to be getting screwed. Donald Trump is throwing everyone under the bus. This is the definition of throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Trump said very glibly, like, this could be this could be months. It's going to be whatever it needs to be. And he's saying that the government shutdown, it's a higher purpose than your next paycheck. He literally said those words.
Right.
To the government.
It reminds
employees.
me of what's going on in China, which, by the way, Donald Trump just praised China. They are currently eradicating Muslims, Christians, anyone who is religious. They are literally putting them in cages and forcing them to worship the great government that is China, of course, with Xi Jinping at the head of it. So when Donald Trump says that he likes China better than the opposition party, of course, the Democrats, that is absolutely un-American, completely insane. And again, not normal, should not be treated as normal. And we have to remind ourselves, presidents should not act that way.
China is re-educating an entire ethnic group, the Uyghurs.
And Donald Trump,
they are
again,
literally in re-education camps, being monitored at all times. And that's the symbol of American excellence.
And of course, what they're doing with their technology, how nefarious they're using that with the credit system. The more pro-government you are, the better credit score you have. If any other president, Barack Obama, said something like that, you can imagine what the right would do. They would freak if Barack Obama said that the Chinese government is better than the Republican Party. That would be like they would be going crazy. But because Trump just spews so much, it's easy for people on the right, I guess, to just hop over that sentence, go down the line of a paragraph, and find something that you like, I suppose. But it's unbelievable to think if we put the same words that Trump says in the mouth of Obama. And again, you know me, I think Obama made a lot, and I'm not being like, oh, he's a god or something. But the fact of the matter is, the right would be going crazy and pushing for impeachment.
You know, Trump is talking about using executive authority to put this wall through. I mean, the last time, so Obama did that in 2012 with DACA, and they were saying that it was like treason. And,
and of course, W used it when it came to after 9/11. When it comes to national emergencies, of course, Kennedy used it when it came to the Cuban Missile Crisis, and now Trump is using it for this reason.
But I don't know why people are even trying to reason with it, or like not saying the same thing about Trump. This is insane, and it is actually harming Americans, whereas DACA was actually benefiting
around 800,000 Americans, ironically enough. So just one little case study here. So there's a gal, her name is Leela Johnson. She's 71 years old. Her part-time job as a custodian at the Department of Agriculture pays $22 an hour and helps to supplement her retirement as she cares for her 2 great-grandsons. But her last paycheck arrived at the end of December. Miss Johnson is now relying on her Social Security benefit to keep up with her car payments, credit card balance, and other bills, and is starting to fall behind. This is according to her. She says, "It's a struggle. I have to pay a little here and a little there. I'm doing the best I can, but people need to go back to work to take care of their families." So anyone that wants to talk about how people are lazy, they don't like to work, these people want to work, they need to work, and the fact that the government is stopping them from gainful employment is totally counterintuitive, completely counterproductive, and I think a big political loser, inevitably for Trump, even though I don't even think the Democrats are looking very good here. I think everyone in this country is looking at government being like, this is the smallest thing you can do. Stay open. Like, we're not even asking you to do it. It's just like, be open. It's so easy.
Just fund the government for like another month so that people could eat.
Oh my God!
But you know what? These people are being selfish. They don't need paychecks. They need to serve the higher purpose of a wall.
Of course. So what's going to happen from here? So number one, what could happen? Donald Trump declares a national emergency. The president's address fell just shy of declaring a national emergency. Of course, that was the one earlier this week. If Mr. Trump does invoke his presidential powers, he could bypass Congress and obtain the means for his wall through military resources. Another thing that could happen, Trump strikes a deal with Congress. Is this possible? Trump met with congressional leaders at the White House this past Wednesday in another effort to resolve the shutdown, only to end up walking out when Democrats remained firm on no wall funding. This is according to his frickin' Twitter. This is one thing he tweeted. He said, "Just left a meeting with Chuck and Nancy. A total waste of time. I asked what is going to happen in 30 days if I quickly open things up. Are you going to approve border security, which includes a wall or a steel barrier?" Nancy said no. I said, bye-bye. Nothing else works.
My God.
That is a.
I said
I got criticized for swearing too much on the show recently, so I'm not. That's a presidential tweet. I said bye-bye.
That'll be in the Library of Congress.
Okay, so let's just say that perhaps that doesn't work. What are some other options? The shutdown continues. Again, as we said, 800,000 federal workers, not getting paid. Over the last 20 days, federal employees have shared their fears of affording rent, making credit card payments, and so on, as we've discussed. So that's basically what we got. He can compromise with Congress. He can declare a national emergency, which is going to be challenged in the courts, and we're going to talk about that with Lance here coming up in a second. And otherwise, people are just going to continue to be screwed over. The administration is promising that tax refunds will be processed on time and federal food assistance will continue, but it seems clear the administration didn't realize this was a possible outcome when they began. This may be a partial government shutdown, but the impact on the lives of Americans and on the U.S. economy as a whole is significant and growing. So, congratulations. We've set another record. Longest shutdown in U.S. history under Donald Trump. So I guess this is making America the greatest country on the face of the planet, setting records.
As far as like what will happen, I think if he if he was going to use his executive authority and have soldiers, do the job for him, I think he would have done it already, honestly. And the fact that he's like stomping out of meetings with Chuck Schumer.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I think that shows that he doesn't have like the balls to actually do the executive order
Honestly,
stuff.
man, I don't know.
I don't think so. And he's not going to make any kind of deal. I think what's going to happen is there's going to be like some symbol of him winning, some lame version of a wall that he's going to like extort money out of some
steel barrier,
something,
all that kind of stuff.
and then he's going to it's going to pale in comparison to what he actually wants, and he's going to call it a victory, and his base will
yeah,
agree
but you know what? Maybe his base will like it, but he's not expanding the base whatsoever, and I have a feeling he's peeling off support even from them. Hey everyone, today's episode is brought to you by Quip. They know New Year's resolutions are tough. Starting a healthy routine and sticking to it are two very different things. We all end up skimping on that full night of sleep, skip a workout or two, or brush our teeth with a tired old toothbrush. We're not perfect, but we can do better. And Quip is the better electric toothbrush that can help. Did you know 75% of us use old, worn-out bristles that are ineffective? The Quip delivers brush heads automatically on a dentist-recommended schedule every 3 months for just $5. It's a friendly reminder for when it's time to refresh your bristles and to stay committed to your oral health. The Quip comes with a multi-use cover that works as a stand, sticks to mirrors, and slides over your bristles to pack and protect your Quip on the go. The Quip runs for 3 months on a single charge, and with no wires or clunky charger, the Quip keeps your bathroom uncluttered and is perfect for traveling. Quip is one of the first electric toothbrushes accepted by the American Dental Association. They're backed by over 25,000 dental professionals, and they have thousands of verified 5-star reviews. That's why I personally love Quip, and over 1 million happy, healthy mouths do too. Get Quip at just $25, and if you go to getquip.com/tophat right now, you can get your first refill pack for free. That's your first refill pack for free at getquip.com/tophat. Right now, I'm honored to have with me an attorney. He is practicing immigration law in San Antonio, Texas. He's on the front lines of this. Lance Curtright is with me. Thank you so much for being on the show, man.
Thank you for having me.
So you have worked in immigration as a lawyer for multiple administrations. You said that you worked while George W. Bush was in office, while Obama was in office, and now we have what's going on with Donald Trump. Could you just give our audience a feel of what are some of the differences now that you have been able to experience with Trump versus Obama versus W? Because obviously W came out, he was a little bit more of a compassionate conservative when it comes to immigration, to use his nomenclature, talking about immigration in a much more traditional sense. And then we have Obama, who was called deporter in chief, and a lot of people thought he sort of turned his back on a lot of the liberals that put him in office. They thought he was maybe too hawkish on immigration. And now we have what's going on with Donald Trump, which has led us to now, I think, 21 days going into a shutdown. So what are some of the differences within these administrations?
Right. Well, so Bush came in there, and actually under his administration, somewhat surprisingly, that was our best chance to get comprehensive immigration reform when
Right.
They actually tried to pass that bill. But, even when he came into office, that was right after September 11, and
Right.
they implemented a lot of really restrictive programs, including making a lot of Muslims register. So there's a lot of fear in the community at that time period.
Right.
There's a lot more people being arrested as compared to the Obama years.
Right.
So Obama comes in, and he has this situation where a lot of people from Central America are coming to the port of entry and want to seek asylum, and he starts deporting a lot of people without, at the border, and kind of really turning people around quickly.
Right.
That's why he got that name, deporter in chief. But I'm not sure that's completely fair to him, because the way he treated a lot of people inside the country was pretty good. I mean, he did pass DACA. He did try to pass the DAPA program, which really would have provided relief for millions of people. I mean, thousands of immigrants, but then their families,
Right.
their spouses. So many people would have been better off. You would have had undocumented people getting work authorization, which would have been in return given them Social Security cards, which would have made them taxpayers. I mean, it would have been great for our economy.
Right.
And then there's Donald Trump, and the words impunity. that I think is happening, because it's so inconsistent that we tell clients when they start a case that, well, for example, you're going to qualify for asylum because you are a single mother from Guatemala and you've been abused.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. That's a problem in the country.
Right.
The police do nothing to stop it, so forth and so on. The Board of Immigration Appeals has said this is a recognized social group that will qualify this client, this hypothetical client, for asylum. And then Obama, through Jeff Sessions, goes through
or Trump, rather.
Not Obama, Trump.
Yeah.
Trump, through Jeff Sessions, goes through a lot of these different rules that were hard and fast rules of asylum and changes them. So what you have are people who start the asylum process with one set of rules,
right,
and through the Attorney General and his capriciousness, they're changing the rules.
Right.
So that's just one aspect of it. I mean, the Trump administration and how they've attacked immigrants has many different, varieties, which we can talk about.
Right.
But really what he's doing is he changes the rules midstream.
Right. So obviously people going through the process legally, such as what happened with DACA recipients, and now, of course, they have a lot of fear within that community. When is ICE going to come knocking on their doors and drag them away? What's your sense right now within specifically the Hispanic community, because it seems as if they're the targets, and I do want to expand a little bit more later on in the conversation. Under W, you mentioned how it was Muslims, and Muslims are still under attack under Trump as well, but it's just interesting how the focus seems to shift from groups of people that might not be fully franchised, still disenfranchised in many ways. The blame the immigrant rhetoric. Have you ever seen anything? Is that rhetoric coming from Trump really? How is that resonating within the community of immigrants?
Well, it's causing extreme amounts of fear. I think politically it's always nice to have a scapegoat, and
right.
Trump's really kind of lashed upon this alleged crisis that he's manufactured himself through his
right.
actions. So yeah, I mean, complete fear, and there's a lot of misinformation.
Right. What would you have to? What would you say if you have to talk to somebody? You're just at a tavern. Someone says, "I think we got to build the wall. I think Trump is just, we got to take care of Americans. He's putting the Democrats want to put illegals. They say illegal aliens, which I think is so offensive because they're human beings. They're not coming from outer space, for crying out loud. But what would you tell them? What is the key piece of misinformation that we are being fed right now? And tell them how do you convince them what the truth actually is?
Well, I think you have to start from the very beginning, and that's with the falsehood that this is a crisis at the border. I think it's been well reported that there's really no crisis at the border, and I think the majority of Americans know that. But when you're talking to someone who's adamantly for the wall, it's kind of hard to find some common ground
right.
because they believe there is a crisis. So you have this a priori issue of what is true.
Right.
And you have to really kind of unpack a lot of the misinformation the administration is giving out on a daily basis, tweet by tweet. So that's where I'd start. Just start, who's actually coming to the United States and why?
Okay.
So it's not a bunch of people coming illegally from Mexico as it was in years past. Really what you have are Central Americans, primarily, women and their children, who are trying to enter the country legally to get asylum. But what the administration has done is they have metered their entries, meaning they're not going to take them all in at once, causing them to stay in squalor in Mexico. And then when they get here, they separate them from their families, as they've done in the past, or they put them in detention.
Right.
All of these policies have actually increased illegal entries because people, want to get in the United States and they don't want to stay in their conditions in Mexico, which is also dangerous. So it's kind of ironic because, the president says he wants to stop the illegal entries, but at the same time, through his own policies, he's actually increasing them.
Interesting. So sort of a unintended consequence of so-called being tough on immigration is that because it's now no longer a viable option to go through a port of entry to request asylum, there's more people going in illegally.
That's exactly right.
So if we have Donald Trump talking about, I believe the administration said that there was 4,000 people coming up through the southern border that were detained because they were on a terror watch list or because they were accused of terrorism. Now we come to find out that number was actually 6. When dealing,
I hadn't heard that.
When dealing with this alternate universe, are you working with people? What do you tell your clientele that you're defending on a regular basis? What do you tell them as far as their legal options now when it comes to seeking asylum or when it comes to being able to stay in this country? What is their legal recourse? Because it seems to me like it's just been so unbelievably diminished because now we have this narrative that they possibly are a terrorist.
Right. Well, I think what I start is usually kind of trying to ease some of the terror and some of the fear. And the way I do that typically is by reminding everyone that although the Trump administration can obviously do a lot of damage to immigrants and in many other areas of the law,
right?
Immigration law is still based upon acts of Congress. Mm-hmm. And Congress hasn't passed any meaningful immigration bill since '96. So, and I don't think there's any really chance that they're going to do that anytime soon.
Why? Why do you think that is? We can't get any immigration law passed in this country. But finish with your point, and then we can talk about that.
Well, so most of the things that people are applying for are acts of Congress. Congress is the body that passes bills that says who gets green cards, who can apply for citizenship, and that sort of thing. Now, certainly on the outside, the administration can make that more difficult by changing its prosecution guidelines, as happened from Obama to Trump. That was a major, major shift.
What were the changes there from Obama to Trump specifically?
Well, in a very general sense, Obama said, hey, let's focus our resources on criminal aliens, people who are here undocumented and have committed a crime, as he says,
right?
People who are terrorists, things of that nature. And Trump kind of said, well, we're going to focus on everyone. If you recall, Obama had the prosecutorial discretion guidelines where he allowed ICE attorneys to administratively close, which means stop the deportation process for people who were here living without any problems with the law.
Okay.
Now, Trump, one of his first things he did was he says, hey, there's nobody here that doesn't have a problem with the law while he's president, and he's trying to go after everyone, which is clogging up the immigration courts who already have historic backlogs.
Right. So it is on Congress to make these laws. Obviously, as you just mentioned, the president does have quite a bit of power as well. Politically, through your years of experience in this, why has it been so hard to get comprehensive immigration reform through?
Wow. Well, that's a tough question. I'm not sure I actually have all the answers to this, but I think right now what's happening is there's a real sense that immigration and immigrants in general are causing problems in the United States. I think that's based upon a lot of the mistruth that Donald Trump is passing.
Right.
But I think that played well politically for him, and I think it's, again, it's convenient to have a scapegoat, and I think Donald Trump found immigrants to be that scapegoat, and he wrote it at the election. So I think that's the problem today that we have in this administration. It's not the same problem I think we've had years past. I think when Obama was president, I think it was politically convenient for the Republicans to oppose that. And when Bush was president, I think that, I can't remember exactly who sponsored that bill, but I want to say it was McCain and somebody else. There was a real chance to pass some immigration reform at that time, but again, it kind of stalled out, I think, because of the extreme right wing wasn't going to get on board. I think that sunk it. So it's always been kind of this political ping pong. I think it's convenient for people to have gridlock on this issue,
right?
Politically,
of course, and I think, as you mentioned, it is extremely easy to pick on a small group of people that really don't have a lot of rights. If you are someone who is here and you're undocumented, what rights do you have? If one of our audience members is listening and perhaps they've overstayed their visa, which of course is extremely common, that's the vast majority of people who are currently in the country illegally, it's because they overstayed a visa. What rights do they have, or is it really just whenever ICE wants to come or whenever the crackdown happens, they're totally going to be screwed?
Well, ICE still has to have probable cause to effectuate an arrest. And I always tell my clients that if that happens, be respectful, but don't say anything, don't sign anything, call me right away. Because what will happen under the Trump administration is that they arrest first and ask questions later. So what they typically will do is they'll take someone into custody, and if that person starts saying, my name is Lance Curtright, and I'm from Ireland or wherever, and I don't have any papers to be here, that all those statements can be used against you in an immigration deportation proceeding. Right. So it's always best to say nothing and to sign nothing, and that's just a general rule for life. Never say anything to a law enforcement agent without your lawyer beside you.
Of course.
I tell them not to say anything, and then just know that you're going to go to jail. They're going to put you in custody for a while, and then most people will qualify for a bond, which we'll try to get them a bond as quickly as we can.
Right.
San Antonio, you're looking about maybe a week to a week and a half before you get that bond hearing. But you have a right to a bond hearing. You have a right to a lawyer. You have a right to stay quiet. You don't have to answer a lot of the questions. You don't have to let people in your house without them showing you a warrant. A lot of the same rights that we have as American citizens apply as well to people here in the interior. But I think what I see a lot is people, wanting to maybe talk their way out of it, maybe saying, oh, don't pick me up, or, yeah, you're right, I'm here illegally, thinking that's going to help them.
Right.
But it's not.
So, Texas is just a fascinating state right now. I love what's been going on. If you look at what happened with Beto, coming close with Ted Cruz, it seems like Texas is turning a little bit purple. Obviously, you have a lot of ranchers out there. My co-host here, who's usually here, Marcus, his family has a ranch. A lot of Hispanic workers in Texas. Where is Texas at right now when it comes to immigration? Because I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong here, I feel like a lot of the anti-immigrant rhetoric is resonating in places where perhaps the fear-mongering works because you were talking about maybe in Wisconsin or in Michigan, where maybe there isn't actually a large immigration population. What's your feeling right now of Texas, previously thought to be blood red, and now it seems to be becoming a little bit more purple? Do you think they're more rational on this issue?
Well, I think so. I think it's coming. I think it's coming to terms with this immigration issue. These people are not. They're not these people we're talking about in political debates. These are our neighbors.
Right.
They send their kids to our schools. They go to our churches. They're in our community. So it's very real for a lot of Texans. That's not to say it's not very divided. I would say the Beto Cruz election really kind of showed that divide, not necessarily just on immigration, but in the other issues. But when you unpack the immigration issues of the day, I think some of them really affect Texans and they're kind of rankling against it. For example, the border wall.
Right.
You're talking about taking a lot of property from a lot of Texans.
Yep.
For a farce, for a wall that is not going to work based upon a manufactured crisis.
Right.
So I think when you're talking about people in Wisconsin versus Texas, they might be both red-blooded Republicans, but the person who's losing his land is going to be far more reasonable about this than the person who's not.
Right.
So I think, I think they are coming around. I think obviously we have a lot more Hispanic voters here in Texas that are becoming more politically active and might want to vote for somebody who's more reasonable on immigration reform.
Right.
I think Beto kind of encapsulated some of that, and hopefully he can move that into the national stage.
When you've mentioned this manufactured national crisis, which is exactly what it is. It fascinates me how maybe the more Freedom Caucus, people who might be a little bit more libertarian, support this president who is now vastly increasing the power of the office when it comes to declaring a national emergency. Can you talk a little bit about previous administrations when they used a national emergency? I know after 9/11, obviously, national emergency that was declared. What's the difference between this current crisis and previous administrations?
Well, the difference is there's no emergency here.
Right.
I don't.
Well, that's a big difference.
There's no crisis. There's no crisis at the border. I think, and I hope that if he does declare a crisis, it's immediately challenged in the courts. Where I would remind your listeners that we've had, as immigration advocates, great success challenging many of these Trump proposals.
Okay.
And I think that's where this one will go to die, like so many of the other Trump proposals.
Right.
But it's hard to see that on January 11th that he has a way out of this because he's really backed himself, forgive my metaphor, against a wall.
Yeah.
Where he has to build the wall to appease his base and Ann Coulter. So it's going to be hard for him to get out of that without doing something. So I guess what he's going to fall back upon is this idea of an emergency that he's going to declare. But it's not an emergency, and I think it's an abuse of that presidential prerogative, and I think the courts will see that and hopefully not allow it to happen.
Well, I don't want to correct you at all. Obviously, you're the attorney, but he's backed himself against the steel slats. So, I don't want to. I'm not gonna. So you mentioned how the courts have been fair on this issue for the most part. Because I think that really does the irony of this current administration is it is showing me that our system holds. It holds when we have someone literally trying to ruin it from the inside, from the most powerful office in the world, certainly in this country. What are some wins that you have seen that make you optimistic when it comes to this immigration debate in the courts?
Well, it's not necessarily a win, but one of the things that comes to mind is the litigation on family separation. I think we've done some good things there.
Right.
That's probably the first one that comes to mind. Let's see. The DACA cases have been great so far. The impunity on the DACA cases, where he's going to come in there and say he declares DACA to be illegal and therefore the program to be illegal, and therefore he's going to stop it.
Right.
And then the courts say, well, actually, it wasn't an illegal program, so you can't stop it. I thought that was just a glorious bit of legal analysis and great lawyering by the people who put that together. That's probably my favorite win so far. We'll keep counting, though, hopefully.
Oh, absolutely. And, of course, we've supported DACA recipients since day one. I think it was the least we could do, create a path to citizenship. Because, to me, I'm just a layman here, but to me it just seems totally ironic that we can't have a conversation about getting a path to citizenship, a reasonably timed path to citizenship, and then we just have this whole... They're here illegally, but they're here illegally because there are no doors open for them. Finally, DACA comes in, opens a window at the very least, and then they want to shut that. So it just seems like this vicious cycle of political parties, specifically Republicans in this case, they create this issue. Do you think they the ones who are creating the very nature of the issue of undocumented or illegal people here?
Well, certainly a certain segment of the party is. I would say that the more business-minded segments of the party are maybe in favor of DACA.
Right.
Just think about it from an economic point of view. We've educated these children. We've sent them to our colleges. They're now working and creating businesses and generating income for the United States, paying taxes, raising their children here, contributing to our community in many other ways. And we want to send them back and lose all of those things that they're providing for us. It makes no sense.
Absolutely. After we invested our resources, they've gone to our public schools. I just don't. It really does make zero sense, except for if you're thinking from a political perspective and you're a congressperson who wants to win re-election. That's the only sense it makes. And I think that's what drives people frickin' crazy. Like when Nixon squashed a peace deal in Vietnam so he could run on the platform of Vietnam. That kind of stuff just is. That's why when we talk about Congress at 11% approval rating, it's laughable, but it's also exceptionally sad. And I think that's why they're so low.
Yeah. Well, we elect them to do something to make things better for us, and they're just doing nothing on this. But hopefully there's a new House and representatives, a majority of Democrats, and hopefully they see this issue and can do something about it. I don't have a lot of hope, though.
Well, who knows? Who knows? Obviously, Chuck Schumer and Nancy, they gave their rebuttal to Donald Trump's Oval Office speech, and I don't know why someone told them to look like Bond villains, but evidently that was the theatrical note given. When it comes to Trump's base, obviously he does well in rural areas. He does well with the farmers and people in that agricultural fields. But now we have what happened with the tariffs. Obviously, because the government is shut down, in order to make up for the losses, in order to recoup those losses, they passed, I believe it was a $12 billion stimulus, basically, for farmers, but now they're not going to be able to get it. And farming, for as long as I frickin' know, has sort of been predicated on cheap immigration labor. Do you see those agriculture, the leaders of agriculture, the farmers and stuff like that, do you see them at some point just turning their back on this immigration hardline policy because at the end of the day, they need work?
I think they're going to have to. I talked to many ranchers and farmers here in South Texas, and a lot of them rely upon immigrants to help with their cattle and help with their day-to-day work. And it's not even a question of U.S. citizens who might be able to do the job. There's just nobody out there. You're talking about major parts of rural Texas where there's no one there, and they need somebody out there who can help them. And some of these folks have been helping them for years and decades even. and now they're thinking maybe they should go back, or maybe maybe they're not wanted here. And the answers are in some of these people I've talked to say, no, you're wanted here, and we just need to get through this because this is kind of the way the United States does immigration policy, by the winds of Washington politics. There's never been a permanent fix. There's never been a real clear-eyed vision of what we should do on immigration. So we get stuck in these demagogues who come up and blame the immigrants for all of our nation's woes.
Right.
It's just not true. And I think every rational American knows it.
Oh, sure.
And hopefully can see through it.
Well, I'm interested because you mentioned how people are coming over the border. They're seeking asylum because women and children, because of violence in their home countries of Honduras, Guatemala, obviously Mexico. I mean, we've talked about this previously. In 2016, I believe it was 58,000 deaths, murders, and the only worst nation was Syria, which has a little bit of a war going on. What do you think the U.S. could actually do? I think when it comes to policy, if we want to stop immigration, don't we need to kind of help those societies in some ways so that people can stay there? What do you have any insight onto what policies you would like to see the government put in place so we don't have caravans of people seeking refuge in our nation because they can stay in their countries because now there has been peace?
Well, that is the ultimate question. I think whenever you're talking about Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, you have to realize that you're really talking about failed states here.
Right.
These are situations where the government's not working well enough to protect their children. It's a situation where caravans are coming to the United States, and we think, I guess Donald Trump thinks that's a crisis. But think of it from those countries' perspective. They're really forfeiting their futures. I mean, here come their future lawyers, doctors, and journalists.
Right.
Here comes all their children up through Mexico, crossing those dangerous parts.
Ugh.
So in order for us to ever actually be serious about how we're going to solve this problem for them and for us, we have to get into the weeds of those countries and see, well, what's causing this?
Right.
And you do have impunity in some of those governments. You do have large amounts of corruption. You do have gangs who not only are in those countries, they are running large parts of those countries as though they are the government. They're quasi-governmental. And so how we go about tackling all those problems, all the things they present is beyond my pay grade. But I would say that it can't start with us withdrawing our aid from them, as I think has been discussed.
Right.
It has to start with full-on engagement, where we actually have to do a little bit of nation building here to our southern border and try to make these countries get so they can stand up on their own.
Right.
And that's going to require possibly a lot of liaisoning through multiple different agencies to make that happen.
Yep.
But that's the only way I think that ultimately fixes this problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, this administration is as shallow as Donald Trump, as shallow as an Easter egg bunny, a chocolate Easter egg bunny, that is. So I don't think they're going to be doing that anytime soon because that's comprehensive. No. It's difficult, and it would take both parties, I think, committed to actually doing it. So I completely agree. We've got to go to the source, and then all these people who are razzled about immigration and flooding of immigrants over the border, well, if you want to solve it, that's how you do it. You got to nip it in the bud. You got to go to where the problem begins, and then we don't have.
We're going to spend $5 billion on something. It should be on that,
absolutely.
Not on a feckless wall.
Absolutely. And of course, when you get over here now, we have just absolutely inhumane, horrible policies. Can you talk? Do you have any insight? We heard about obviously. As you mentioned previously, with family separation. We saw the images of the children being ripped from their mothers and fathers, and we've seen images now of a lot of abuse of children happening in these detention centers. A couple in Texas, I think, had to be closed. What insight do you have on the day-to-day conditions? You cross the border, you get processed. Next thing you know, you're a 7-8-year-old. You're away from your family. What's that process look like?
Well, it's not pretty. Even before we had the situation with children, we had complaints about some of these centers where they're holding people. They have these like metallic-looking blankets that you see on TV.
Yeah.
And they're caging these people up. It's the word comes to mind. It's just not. It's inhumane, and we can do better. I think. I think in fairness, I think a lot of some of the agents who are actually taking them in and trying to deal with them, they've lacked the training to deal with this. They're not trained to see, someone who might be ill, for example, who came across the border. They're just trying to, corral everybody. So if we're going to, and we have to take these people in, we have to consider the human elements of that. So you're talking about children. You don't want to scar them any more than they've already been scarred. You want to make sure there's healthcare professionals. You want to make sure that they're received in a situation that is not jail-like, but more school-like, more family-friendly. So we can, so for so long as they are with us, we can treat them as, as giving them the humanity that they deserve.
Absolutely.
Regardless of how they enter the country, because, even if you enter the country, you are illegally, you're definitely deserving all those things.
So that's obviously on the front end is the separation. And then you have the back end with the reunification. And I've heard stories, I've read a few stories about literally people being like they can't match the kids. They can't match the kids to the parents. What is, which is just mind-blowing, how you could take a kid and not be able to get its parent, to get connected back to its parent. Why is that so bad? Is it as bad as some of the articles that I've read when it comes to the reunification of children with their parent or parents?
Yes, well, I think my understanding is that they didn't really keep track of that when they first came in, and then they kind of lost track of everyone. So yeah, when that happens, it's as bad as you can possibly imagine. I mean, I have 3 daughters, and I just shiver when I think about how those people must be feeling.
Right.
Yeah, it's awful. And I don't know if they're doing enough to make these families get back together. Some of these people have been deported. So going and trying to find them in a country where violence is everywhere is going to be extremely problematic. So I think it's as bad as it can get, and I really think history is going to judge us very, very poorly for this time period.
Absolutely. I mean, I hope that history judges us poorly for this time period. If they embrace it like it was a good experience, I don't want to live in the present of whatever the future is.
Exactly right. Well, we got to work for a better future.
Absolutely. So then what happens to those kids? If they're in a detention center, their parents or again, parent got deported back to Honduras, what do we do with this child?
I think that depends on the child. Including the foster care system, we have some who actually qualify for immigration benefits through the Special Immigrant Juvenile System program. Some of them are applying for asylum on their own.
Right.
We have a docket in San Antonio and it convenes weekly where they only hear kids' cases. They bring them all in. They get all dressed up where they wear their ties and everything, and they have to go and sit in front of the judge.
I have a question about that. So is it true then that the child is sort of in charge of their own destiny, that they have a lot of, they're asking, I saw a clip as a 2-year-old was being asked if they wanted to stay or go. I'm like, this is a baby. Are they really in that, do they have that much of a responsibility at that young of an age?
Well, typically they're going to have some type of person helping guide those decisions and answer them for them. I don't think a 2-year-old is going to necessarily always say, I want to get deported. And the judge here who handles these is extremely empathetic and understands the situation very, very well. So I heard about that case too. I don't think that's happening here. I haven't seen that anyway.
Okay, well that is at least a good brighter news, because I know you have to be careful. I always try to be moderate and cautious, because I don't want to fall into the fear mongering on either side. Because
I'm not denying it didn't happen. I haven't seen it personally.
Okay, interesting. So just lastly, when it comes to, you mentioned Wall Street Republicans, people maybe more fiscally conservative. They believe in the economy. They want the free market. They must be going crazy. What went on with TPP and now basically the CPTPP, where the Canadians are now opening up with 10 other countries, opening up the Asia Pacific market without us. They must be pulling their hair out. But they also understand the fiscal responsibility of housing this many people in these facilities. Do you have any insight into the cost? What does it cost for us as a people, as a nation, to finance one child in federal custody?
Well, that's one angle to look at that issue. But I think this whole custody bit of immigration is big business. These privately funded prisons who are, traded on Wall Street, they're making a lot of money. And they build these huge jails in Texas where they can hold 2,000 souls, and those people bank. That's big money. And some of those little towns, they're propped up by that.
Interesting.
So I think whenever you got more people detained, someone's making a lot of money on that. And the taxpayer's not. They're spending money on it. I don't really know how much they pay per day, but it's not cheap. But someone's making money, and that's those corporate prisons.
I'm so happy you brought that up. We can just end it with this, but that was my last kind of line of questioning I had regarding the private prisons, Core Civic, GEO Group, the amount of people who, once they're rounded up in these ICE invasions, they go to these private prisons where they're held. So how much money is being made, the aforementioned Texas holding area, which is literally a former super Walmart, which is so ironic and it's almost artistic how sad that is. How much money is being made on detention, and because of that, is there, again, any motivation to change?
Well, I can only estimate how much money, but my guess is in the millions. But I think that's a real reason why a lot of people are saying, yes, we need to detain everyone. We need to detain more. I think there's probably a powerful lobby behind that. And that's certainly going to be a force against change and a powerful voice for people who are supporting Donald Trump's mistruths about how all immigrants are criminals.
Right. I mean, to monetize human suffering, it seems like it's anti-American, but is this something when it comes, there's a great documentary, it's a little bit older now, but the 13th Amendment, talking about Angola prison, literally built on a slave plantation, and basically, once you criminalize everything and choose to criminalize a people, you got slavery right back. Are this, what's happening right now, are these people new slave labor? Are immigrants being detained the new slave labor?
Well, I don't know if they're doing much labor. I don't know what they're doing in those jails. I think they're just kind of staying there. But I think the analogy about how we're treating them is close to that. We're talking about a whole group, and we're putting them in jails, and people are making money off of it. And that's immoral. It's wrong, and it needs to stop. Yeah,
absolutely. Let's see. Is there anything else that you would like to touch on, Lance?
Oh, wow. We talked about a lot. Yeah, I think we got it covered. Well, I guess we could talk about the shutdown.
Let's.
That's been a real problem. I have a case right now that maybe your listeners would be interested in hearing about.
Absolutely.
Where she's been in deportation proceedings before the court for 8 years. Actually, going on 9 years. It's 2019. And the way we plan on getting her green card is based upon, in part, her U.S. citizen husband. And we need to get a hearing in order to finalize the case. And her husband is in hospice care, and he's dying.
Oh.
And we can't get that hearing because they're not funded.
Because of the government shutdown.
Because of the shutdown. So in the old days, when something like that was happening, we would reach out to ICE lawyers, and they're very sympathetic to this type of situation. And we'd say, hey, look, we got to get a hearing, and then we get a judge, and the judge would, accommodate us by giving us a hearing, I think, in this type of case.
Right.
But, now they're not allowed to because they're not getting paid because the government is not being funded because of this fiction that we need a wall.
Right. So the backlog right now, obviously, as you just mentioned, there's no immigration courts that are open. And isn't that...
Well, the detained courts are working. So if you're in jail, you're still having your case heard. But the non-detained docket is the bulk of the cases are on the non-detained docket.
Okay.
And that has stopped. It's a little ironic, too, if you think about it. Because,
it's extremely ironic, yeah.
Yeah, right. So basically he's saying, we need to enforce the immigration laws. We need the immigration judges to hear these cases. But then he stopped funding them, so they can't, and so all these cases are being rescheduled, postponed, and canceled. They'll probably be set out to 2020, possibly even 2021, and it's just ballooning the backlog.
Unbelievable.
So it's really working against himself in some situations.
Absolutely. Well, just I guess we can put on our prediction caps, and I'm sure both of us will be wrong. When do you think, because I'm done with the prediction game, but we still play it every now and again. What do you think is the final outcome of this shutdown? Is Trump taking the massive hit? I think it always goes up to the head, and I think that the president is always blamed in these situations. Or does somehow he manage to squirm out of this as he has squirmed out of so many other political debacles?
Well, I predict he claims victory no matter what happens.
Of course.
And I predict that he claims an emergency and tries to build a wall without congressional support. I predict that gets defeated in the courts, but it'll take months before that happens, and people will forget about what happened, and this will be a footnote to 2018, 2019.
Oh, yep, that's extremely possible. The longest government shutdown in U.S. history could simply be forgotten about with, I don't know, another tweet, I guess.
There's so much litigation going on in immigration. It's just case to case, day to day. We come to work, look at his Twitter feed, and then, conduct ourselves accordingly.
Jeez, unbelievable. Lance Curtright, thank you so much for being with me today. Practicing immigration attorney out of San Antonio, Texas. I really appreciate you taking the time, and please come back on the show.
Oh, sure. My pleasure.
All right, there it was. Thank you all so much for listening. I got to say, I like Lance a lot. He's going to become a regular guest.
He's awesome.
He's awesome. And again, next week, we are honored to have with us Rabia Oshadri. Of course, she wrote the book on Adnan Syed, of course, who was the subject of Serial. So we're going to talk about criminal justice reform, about immigration, just about the politics right now surrounding people of color, specifically immigrants. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating. So don't forget to tune in next week. Okay, everyone, I hope you enjoyed the show. Find me on Instagram at Ben Kissel1. Go to lastpodnetwork.com on Twitter. Follow that account and you can get all the shows right there. Just set a notification or something. And I'm on Twitter at Ben Kissel, trying to engage a little bit more, but still not going too crazy. Okay, everyone, hail yourselves. We'll talk to you soon.
This show is made possible by listeners like you. Thanks to our ad sponsors, you can support our shows by supporting them. For more shows like the one you just listened to, go to lastpodcastnetwork.com.